Hello YouTube, Gorod Radio Moscow here again with another beer review for you, as is usual. For this one we're going to stick to Clackmannanshire in Scotland, my home county if you like, and we're going to go back to the Harviestoun Brewery, and this is one of the very new beers that they've released. This one is called The Ridge, and this was only released a couple of months ago along with an amber ale which is called Broken Dial, but this one is an American style pale ale with a little bit of traditional Scottish character as they put it on their website. So as is usual then with my beer reviews, I'll take you through a very short history of the Harviestoun Brewery. I've shortened it a bit since my other videos, and check those out. The link to them is in the video description. But as always, if you are simply interested in the tasting of this beer, just fast forward a few minutes into the video and it will go right there. So, Harviestoun is one of the oldest craft breweries in Scotland, and the brewery was founded back in 1983 by Ken Brooker, who used to home brew, and he would actually invite many of his friends round to his house to taste his beer, and it's basically spread through word of mouth. But a few years later he decided that he wanted to brew for a living properly, and he converted an old steading in the small village of Dollar into a small brewery back in 1986. Now Dollar is very close to Stirling, which is right in the middle of Edinburgh and Glasgow basically, just if you're wondering where in Scotland we're talking about here. But over the following years they gradually added more beers to their repertoire, and Ken decided to invest in the brewery in 1989, and he installed professional equipment for the first time. A lot of their early equipment was made from salvage. They used an old dye tun and things like that. They were really just building their own equipment, which was pretty cool. But in 1994 they introduced the famous Schiehallion beer, which made a huge name for itself, and they really couldn't have predicted how big this beer got. Those of you watching in Canada and Australia and things like that, that's one of the two beers that you're most likely to find over there. But the big break for the brewery was actually in 1996 when they won the Tesco Beer Challenge, and this resulted in the first bulk order for the brewery, and soon after that they actually launched their flagship beer, which is the Bitter and Twisted, and this began soon after to be exported over to the USA. So the big beers you'll find abroad with these guys are the Old Engine Oil, the Bitter and Twisted, and also the Schiehallion. But since the turn of the millennium the brewery has been even more decorated with many awards and things like that, and they introduced that beer I mentioned to you, the Old Engine Oil Porter, which is a very popular export beer, and this has since been barrel aged to create the Ola Dubh series. I think it's Highland Park casks that they age this thing in for different periods of time, and I think you get a 12, 16 and an 18 in this one. But this was introduced in back in, I think it was 2000, and in 2003 they moved from this old Dollar steading, the old sort of farm buildings, into their new facility in Alva, and it's got these fermentation tanks strapped to the side, so it's quite a funny little place to go and see. But the brewery was actually sold to the Caledonian Brewery from Edinburgh in 2006, which was in turn bought by the Heineken Group in 2008, although they didn't want Harviestoun Brewery and it was sold on again to the current owners. But just to give you a list of beers, that's your brief history of the brewery. Just to give you the list of beers that they do, there's the Schiehallion, which is the lager, a really nice grapefruit kind of flavoured lager, Bitter and Twisted, Old Engine Oil, Engineer's Reserve, Wild Hop Gold, which is a summer season I believe, the new ones they've just released, which is the Broken Dial, which is a really nice amber ale, this guy, the Ridge, which is an American pale ale, and of course you get the Ola Dubh 12, 16 and 18, and those are the barrel aged Highland Park, barrel aged Old Engine Oil beers. Very, very nice apparently. I need to try some of those. But let's get on to the tasting of this guy. I'll just bring up the camera and let you have a little look at the artwork on this one here. The typical sort of trademark of the Harviestoun Brewery is Harvey the Mouse, and I'm not sure if they had a mouse used to run around that old steading in Dollar, but you can see Harvey the Mouse with his wee sort of eyeglass up there on or telescope, I'm not sure what you would call that, maybe an eyeglass, but you can see him just sat on the label there. But it was really nice. This is a kind of standard label for Harviestoun. He's on the bottle cap as well, and just to let you see, he's on the top label too. Paul Romiley from PA Brew News really likes these Harviestoun beers, so hopefully he's interested to see this review. But the hop profile and malt profile of this one I actually couldn't find because it wasn't listed on the website, but what they do say is that it's a 5% American pale ale, and they say that this beer was supposed to find a middle ground between American sort of craft beer pale ale type things and have some Scottish traditional character in it, so it should be a really interesting one for us to try. So let's get it open and get on with the tasting here. Quite looking forward to this because I tried the other one, the Broken Dial, on cask, and it was beautiful, so hopefully this one is the same in the bottle. So we'll get this out. Nice little smoky opening there. It smells very grassy actually, just without paying too much attention to it, but the first impression of this beer is that it's very grassy. So we'll just get this out and into the glass. So as you can see, it's poured a really beautiful kind of, it's actually poured like a kind of very lagery colour actually. You can see it's just got about a 3/4 finger of a head there, frothy and white. That's going to fade away to just a very thin layer, but as you can see, just bring up the light to make sure you get the proper idea of the colour of this guy. It's a very sort of lagery colour, this one, very, very clear. If I put my fingers behind it, you can see the level of transparency there, and there's not much of the way of carbonation going up to the bottom of this one, just a little tiny big bubble now and then. But let's give it a taste and we'll see how we get on here. We'll see how we get on with the smell actually. It's got this really unusual kind of grassy character to it. Like I was saying, you smell that as it comes out of the bottle. But it's got a lot of grassy hop, just a little bit of citrus fruit in there. A little bit of a kind of maybe pine resin in there as well. And there's a little bit of kind of bready malt too. So it's quite interesting in that sense. For a sort of, if it's meant to be an American pale ale, it does have an unusual thing with that really kind of strong grassy character, but it smells quite interesting. It smells very fresh. To me it smells more like a craft lager than a pale ale in honesty, but we'll give it a taste and see how we get on. So as I say, there's just a little bit, yeah, just a little bit of a really nice grassy hoppy character, some nice kind of citric fruit in there too, pine resins and a little bit of a bready malt base. It's quite a simple aroma, this one. Not really, maybe just a little kind of hint of brown sugar and caramel, but very, very faint. So let's taste it now. It's quite interesting. It does have, it's a really kind of unusual blend, this one. It does have the typical sort of mouthfeel that you expect from Harviestoun actually. With me kind of being used to drinking a lot of these beers, it does have the very typical mouthfeel and a really unusual flavour actually. It's much like the aroma actually. You're getting a nice grassy hop on the end, but it's not quite as punchy as you might expect it to be. It's got a really nice kind of bready malt base to it, this one. That the malt base is really sticking to the tongue as you just take it in. It's quite a, the malt base is very cereal. It's got a nice big sort of spicy character to it, and I do quite like that in beers. They've done it quite well in this one. They're kind of going for this mix between the sort of spicy cereal malt base and the kind of fresh citric grassy character. I can see exactly what they're doing here. I mean, for a lot of American people who drink this beer, you might not kind of get the idea that they're going for. A lot of Scottish beers, a lot of Scottish bitters and things like that have this kind of really nice sort of cereal bready spice to it, and they're trying to go for this middle ground here between that and having the really kind of fresh grassy citric hop that you get in some of these American pales. And I can see a lot of Americans being quite a lot of Americans being a bit confused by this beer if it's described as an American pale ale, because it is a very unusual mix actually. So I'm saying Americans, sorry, I should say kind of craft beer people who are used to it, but what they're saying that they're wanting to do here works very, very well. It has this really nice kind of cereal and grainy malt base in there. It's got just a tiny little bit of caramel that sits at the back of the tongue, but overall you get just a kind of blanket of this cereal spice, and you get the fresh kind of grassy and slightly citric character just around the edge of the tongue. It's quite a simple beer compared to what some of their other ones are, but for what they're saying they want to do, it is very, very good. And just towards the back of the tongue at the edges, that's when you're starting to get this sort of pine resin out of it. It's a very interesting beer, as I say, quite unusual because it's this kind of hybrid of styles, if you like. And Americans, when they taste this, when it's described as an American pale ale, they're probably going to think, what is this? But just read about it, have this one with a kind of open mind, and just think about what I've said there with the kind of Scottish character with this nice cereal malt base, and then it moves into the more hoppy things that you guys are used to in the States. But yeah, it's a really interesting blend, this one, so if you do get the chance, definitely give it a go. I mean, the mouthfeel on this one, very light bodied, I would say, just a little tad oily, and that kind of helps bring out a bit of the kind of piney resin character in it. Maybe complements just a little hint of the caramel in the malt base, but that's very mild, I should say. It is more of a spicy malt base, which is what they were going for. The carbonation's very moderate, and it is a little bit dry in the finish, and that kind of complements the sort of grassy and citric flavour too. But overall, to describe this beer, I would highly recommend that you try it, because it is a very interesting hybrid, if you like. As I say, a little bit of that Scottish traditional character that you almost expect from the bitters. They have that in the malt base, and then you've got the more kind of hoppy and grassy pine resin thing that you would associate with some of the American pale ales. So, I mean, drink this beer with an open mind. It's not what you would expect, I would say, but it is very interesting. If you can pick out the individual flavours like that, I'm sure you would enjoy it. But anyway, it's been interesting to try another Harviestoun beer. I do have another one coming up, and that will be the Broken Dial one, which it said is an amber ale, so keep an eye out for that. Let me know in the comment section your own thoughts on this beer if you do happen to have tried it. I'd be interested to see where in the world it's actually reached yet. I'm not sure if it's reached Canada and Australia, stuff like that. But hopefully you've enjoyed the review. Let me know in the comment section your own thoughts, and please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. I'll catch you soon with another beer review, and you will see another Harviestoun one soon. Cheers.